I quit my job after a manager cut my hours. My last shift, I left him with unfiled paperwork leading to his firing. Total chaos. I have been observing this forum for some time, and I finally decided to share my experience. The formatting may appear disorganized on mobile devices. This is a lengthy post, so stay tuned for the interesting details. This incident occurred a few months back at a former workplace. I was employed at a supermarket in my state during high school and while attending college in the United States, starting with a pay of $9 and ultimately earning $10.50 at the end of my tenure. The store employed one store manager, two assistant store managers, as well as one manager and one assistant manager for each of the 9 departments. Over the course of 5 years, I held every position there because hiring practices were somewhat chaotic. Understaffing was a common issue, so if one of the departments required closing and I was on shift, I had to take care of it. My responsibilities ranged from stocking shelves to operating the cash register to management duties. I did it all. My most notable roles included bookkeeper, the individual responsible for tracking financial transactions; monitor, essentially a senior cashier, managing the regular cashiers and distributing cash drawers to each register; service desk, handling cigarettes, lottery tickets, and customer service issues; and store opener closer. Only 5 individuals in the store were familiar with bookkeeping, which included 2 other employees and the 2 managers overseeing the front end of the store. There were approximately 5 monitors who also required training for the service desk. Each monitor and bookkeeper needed to know how to both open and close the store. For a supermarket situated in a town of about 20,000 residents, we were significantly understaffed. I frequently worked shifts of 12 to 16 hours at least once a week due to employees calling off regularly. Keep this context in mind for later. Background: I started my employment there at the age of 16 while still in high school, initially as a stock worker. I began with 25-hour work weeks, which eventually increased to over 35 hours per week. I progressed to cashier, then monitor, followed by service desk, and finally bookkeeper when I turned 18. I am now 21. The hours were consistently good, and I never experienced a week with less than 35 hours. However, everything changed due to one individual. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, I was working while in college, which meant we had to adhere to numerous guidelines. Everyone was scrambling for toilet paper and hand sanitizer to ward off the virus. This was manageable. Additionally, we had been hiring a significant number of people. The store had a history of onboarding new employees with minimal training provided by those who had been working for only a month. As you might guess, this training approach often resulted in chaos. However, due to COVID-19 keeping the store busy, we needed more staff members. I wanted to ensure that new hires were trained properly because I was tired of covering for others. In March, we brought in 4 new hires to fill my position. These new employees also needed to be trained on the service desk. I thought it would be best to let them operate it while I supervised and offered assistance wherever needed. It was the most effective way for them to learn. Most of them required training since only 3 of us, at that time, could manage the service desk. After 4 weeks of training one new hire at a time, we had 7 individuals ready to manage the desk. However, everyone who knew how to operate the service desk also needed to be trained as monitors. Guess who was tasked with training everyone for another role? After another 4 weeks of tedious training, everyone became proficient. By late May, my patience had worn thin. The turning point beginning in June, we started to reduce hours as COVID-19 cases began to decline. The hours for everyone at the register were cut back significantly, from 20-30 hours per week down to a maximum of 10 hours. We became overstaffed, and employees began quitting left and right. While this wasn't a major concern because those positions were simple to fill, my hours suddenly began to dwindle. During this time, one new hire who started in March, whom I will refer to as Helen, received an abundance of hours, specifically my hours. We were in similar financial situations, needing income for college and car expenses. However, I was given a schedule of just 16 hours one week, while she was assigned over 35 hours. Not once since I turned 18 had I received fewer than 35 hours. I resolved to confront the assistant manager responsible for scheduling, whom I will call Frank. Me, hey Frank, I noticed my hours have been reduced. What's going on? Frank, I understand. Everyone's hours are being cut. I have to accommodate everyone, you know? Me, I couldn't help but notice that Helen is getting quite a few hours, so you made room for her and no one else. Frank, I was unaware of that. I will make sure to give you more hours next week. The rest of the week was fairly uneventful since I was a workaholic. Nobody contacted me to cover shifts or anything similar. The following week, I inquired among coworkers to find out who covered shifts last week, and it turned out that all the new hires were called before me. This upset me, but I thought it wasn't worth dwelling on. Later that day, I checked the schedule, and unsurprisingly, I was given the same 16-hour schedule. At that point, I was furious. I felt I should have been valued for my seniority, not shafted on hours. So I went back to Frank for another conversation. Me, hey, what is going on here? I thought you were going to find me more hours. I cannot survive on this. Frank, it turns out I couldn't find you any hours. I tried calling me. That is total nonsense. Not one person called me. Instead, all the new hires were contacted. What is going on? Frank, there's nothing I can do. You may need to find another job. This infuriated me beyond measure. I was seething. But this was when my brilliant idea took shape. For a couple of days, I searched for job openings at other supermarkets in my vicinity. After a day of searching, I discovered a position offering double my current pay for the same qualifications. I called them up and secured an interview for the following week. The next day, I went to work for what I unknowingly assumed was my last shift, and I informed Frank about my situation. Me, hey Frank, I wanted to let you know that I took your advice. Frank, advice? Do you mean finding another job? Me, you're absolutely right. I hope you have fun. I will never forget the look on his face, completely stunned. He clearly did not anticipate that I would actually secure another job so quickly. This marked the beginning of my retaliation. After leaving Frank's office, I returned to my usual work routine. Each shift required processing a substantial amount of paperwork in the system to ensure the store closed properly, and bookkeeping was ready for the next day. A little fun fact: that particular day was Snap Day. For those who are unaware, this is the day when government-funded food stamps are loaded onto EBT cards monthly. On this day, I decided to forego all paperwork and simply not do anything. My anger took control and I was done. The store closed around midnight, and I walked out of that place as free as could be. The following day, I woke up to find a barrage of irate texts from my former colleagues. I completely ignored them, unaware that they were indicating I was scheduled to work that morning. I went to the supermarket to purchase some items for my home, and as soon as I entered, every former coworker looked at me as if I had just dropped dead. One of them pulled me aside, and I'll refer to them as George, and this is how the conversation unfolded. George, what the hell, man? I had to cover your shift this morning, and you have the audacity to show up here afterward? Me, I no longer work here. Please leave me alone. I continued to gather my groceries and spoke with one of my closer former coworkers about the events that had transpired. It turned out that Frank had been completely unaware that the previous day was my final day, and that the entire front end of the store had been utterly mishandled. Since the store closed at midnight, and I had neglected to file any paperwork, corporate called the assistant manager. Frank, who was responsible for making sure all departments closed properly, was questioned about the missing paperwork. With no knowledge of my inaction, Frank had to drive over an hour to the store to file all the paperwork himself. Furthermore, he received numerous violations because, without the required paperwork being completed by the closing person, there was no record of anything that had occurred in the store the previous day. To add to the chaos, the paperwork needed was nearly doubled since it was Snap Day. As soon as the store manager was informed about this, she was furious. About a month later, while I was working at my new job, I heard some information regarding Frank. Apparently, he had a meeting with our corporate bosses and the store manager. As a result of the whole fiasco, he lost his job and was unable to obtain a letter of recommendation from that employer. That's tough luck, isn't it? Summary: the manager transferred my hours to a new hire and suggested I find another job. In response, I departed and caused a host of violations that led to his termination due to his reckless comments. Post-edit: for my first post, I sincerely appreciate the upvotes and positive feedback. I never anticipated receiving over 200 upvotes. I will make an effort to keep up with responding to comments, so please keep them coming.